Did you clap?
Yes, I did clap.
Okay.
It was around the 16-second mark, between 16 and 17 seconds.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I'll after we've recorded, send me the file, and I'll stick them together, and we'll be good.
Sounds great. We really should have.
Yeah.
We really should have went over like if we say 1, 2, 3, go, or like 1, 2, 3. I'm glad we got it right. We were just in sync, but that can screw a lot of people up.
Well, that's why I said after 3 as opposed to on 3.
Oh, valid point. See, I just glazed right over that word.
Fuck you for not listening.
I was listening to 95% of it.
Also, this talk about clapping may or may not be on the podcast, depending on how much I can be bothered to edit it down.
That's right. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
The viewer doesn't have to know. We can just edit it all in post.
Dude, our only listener's going to be shubbed by the sounds of things.
We might get Fenny, and that's what counts.
Okay, so we've got 2 Austrians. We'll be big in Vienna.
You know what? That's better than nothing. We'll carve
I'm
out
not
our
denying
niche.
Our niche in Vienna, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if Lou Reed sang about it, and I've been there a couple of times. It's not bad.
I've never been. Tell me, does it have buildings?
Most urban centres have buildings. I mean, it kind of goes with being an urban centre.
Are you sure about that?
I mean, unless you're, the Mongol capital when it's Genghis Khan in charge or something, usually you've got a building or 2.
Well, let me ask you this. Have you been to most urban centres?
That is a reasonable point. I mean, I'll have to go with the statistician approach of the sample size that I have, it has been a very strong trend that urban centres have had buildings.
Okay, well, I'll give you a check plus as an applied statistician himself.
Oh, you're an applied statistician. I did not know.
Well, in a ways, yeah. So I'm an industrial systems engineer by trade, which is very much just applied statistics. Do I remember it all from college? Nope. Am I trying to relearn it? Yes.
I'm a trained biologist, and I can't for the fucking life of me remember the Krebs cycle or the dark phase of photosynthesis or anything, so whatever.
Some degree we got,
Yeah, it's not like I learnt just enough to pass and then stopped giving a shit about half of it. If it's not terraforming or syphilis, I don't care anymore.
Those are 2 very specific things, I must say.
Oh yes, absolutely. Well, syphilis I chose because I did some bioinformatics, an evolution module, and some pathogenic stuff and a microorganism thing. And I realised that if I just focus on syphilis, I can just study one thing, and it'll apply to loads of different modules, so I minimise my workload.
Now that's thinking with your dipstick.
Thanks. But terraforming Mars is just because, that would be cool. There was no other thought process beyond making Mars habitable. That would be some tight shit, yo.
That is true. Well, we could start with this first podcast by going over fun facts with our degrees, if there are such a thing.
We could do, but it might be a good idea if we actually introduce ourselves.
Valid point. Why don't you go first, homie? You're the host.
Okay, so I'll go with my usual online alias. I'm Rataby. Or some people in some servers call me Gish, because that's the other half of the name that I go with. Starting this podcast with Prussian, I'm going to have to ask why he called himself that at some point, because I thought that I may as well try to monetize my rambling. Fuck it, why not? So, Prussian. Why are you Prussian?
Alright, so yes, it goes back to the fact that we're, we played Total War games in that sense. When I first got Empire Total War, that crisp plastic copy from Target in my hand, I was enamored with just the fact that Europe had history behind it. Because my dumbass hadn't gone through the ringer with all these countries and revolutions and stuff. All I learned about was that the United States had a revolution and so on. So I merely
Yeah.
installed that game right into my computer, back in the Windows XP days, and went to town. And although my computer could barely run it, it did it just so, and that's all I cared about. And after Yep, what's up?
I was just going to say, and that's the moment that you realise that the universe didn't dawn in 1776. That there was a thing that the founding fathers were declaring independence from.
That's right, and it was actually the tutorial. So that was pretty cool. And, I played with a lot of different factions, but I always gravitated towards Prussia. I don't know why. Maybe it was just the position. Maybe it was just the colors, because I am a fan of dark blues, but I would always just find myself starting up a campaign for Prussia, short campaign, go all the way to 1750. These turns took hella long in that game, just as they do in any Total War, in fact. And it was actually the first campaign that I actually beat when I was a kid. I decided to start the in a sense, the religious further of North Africa, and also the invasion of North Africa by the Germans. And what I did is I conquered all of the Barbary pirates all around Libya and Morocco and whatnot. And then what I did is I used the war funds from that I gained with all that new territory to go and have a war with Austria. And I just won the campaign by the skin of my teeth. And ever since then, when I needed a tag, so I went with Prussian Warfare. And that name has really just stuck ever since.
And where do the blobs come in? Because you've been blob warfare a couple of times too.
Well, variety is the spice of life. And for me, I just find the blobs adorable. You can just...
They are.
You can just post one, and you'll be instantly happy with posting it.
Yeah, especially when it's that GIF that wiggles. I don't know why, but that one I do find thoroughly charming.
It's an indescribable feeling, too. But I just know when it makes me feel that way. When you just want to just wiggle around.
It gives you the warm fuzzies. The warm mobile fuzzies.
Yeah, it's just always in response to someone said something really funny, or if it referenced to something earlier in the day. It's one of those in the know type feelings of humor.
I see. It's sort of an indication of just being in the loop or something coming full circle.
You gotta really be in the ironicism with humor these days to just really get some encapsulations of it.
Although some of it goes so far with being post-ironic that it just ceases to be funny, which is very weird. I don't understand you fucking Zoomers and your quote-unquote sense of humour. In my day, jokes had follow-throughs and punchlines.
Well, the thing is, humor evolves over time, and it's also symptomatic of the generation it comes from. And for Zillennials and Zoomers in that sense, there's different feelings of just existentialism, specifically existential dread, feelings of an inadequacy.
I fucking know it.
Talking in codes too. I think just with the advent, we're gone past the advent of social media, and we're into the thick of social media. In a sense, it's in between period. And from that, there is just this dichotomy with using the references and combining them with just coded words, so that way they don't follow the same hashtags but follow others. It's just this winding web, and you really have to just be stuck in that spider's web, in my opinion, to fully understand the hilarity of meme creation.
I fully appreciate the memes, But the deep fried shit, why?
The deep fried shit comes from.
Just why?
Well, I can actually explain that one because it just comes from the fact of just people reposting images over and over in the JPEG font and JPEG file image. Because when you repost with a JPEG, it compresses down and it loses quality each time. So the whole
so it's a commentary on the reposting.
Absolutely, that's the thing with deep fried.
I thought it was just an annoying thing like the ear rape stuff. Although I suppose it's going to turn out that the ear rape is a commentary on weird mixing on audio levels or something.
You're absolutely right, because audio can compress as well and lose its quality each time it's reposted. It's the same thing why you'll see memes and pictures of just watermarks like iFunny, pasted like 4 or 5 times, one on top of one another, just overlaying because of a commentary on just reposting. In a sense, an intentional add onto it.
I mean, this is not the way I expected the first podcast to go, but theory of humour and the strange meta-commentary on it is... I was just taking these things for granted as the internet is just a massive pile of shit, so whatever, but there's actually some level of merit to it. This is baffling.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I will say it's pretty random on just how things will become viral, and I mean, that's just a bit of the rub with the word. But say, for example, something like Tyler, the Creator's Igor, and you'll listen to it, and it's and it's in a sense intentionally kind of scuffed around the edges. And I want to, and the key word here is scuffed, and just having that be an attributable quality to what you're creating and making. And there's just a difference that, you as the viewer can somewhat see with that on someone just having something scuffed on purpose or inadvertently.
It's sort of like the ripped jeans fashion thing that went on for
ripped jeans,
sort of 20 years.
Yeah, ripped jeans, or in a sense, movies that are so bad that are bad, or movies that are so bad that they are good.
I have to show you Tiptoes, dude.
Oh, I remember back in the day when Tosh.0 did like a complete episode just going over the plot of Tiptoes, and it's one of the surrealist movies that Peter Dinklage and others have ever participated in.
It's got, when you look at the cast list, you think, okay, this is going to be probably a decent film. It's got Patricia Arquette, Peter Dinklage, Matthew McConaughey, Gary Oldman, Kate Beckinsale. This could be a fairly decent, well put together film, and it's so hilariously bad. Gary Oldman walks on his knees throughout the entire film, except for 3 separate occasions when they hide his legs in furniture, and it's so obviously done.
And it just goes to show you they could have found plenty of short people around Hollywood, but nope, they made Gary Oldman work for that paycheck.
They did, though. They have Peter Dinklage, one of the best dwarfism... well, I was going to say dwarfism actors, because, he clearly acts as if he has dwarfism, but you know what I mean. He's one of the best actors who happens to have dwarfism. They've got him there. They film him for this weird B-plot thing where he's a French anarchist. That's not even really much of an exaggeration. He says that they need to claim rights for little people at the end of a gun, which... I didn't think dwarf radicalism would be a thing in real life. It sounds like a D&D thing. But yeah, they've got Peter Dinklage there, doing a really bad French accent, and instead of making him the lead, they get Gary Oldman to walk on his knees and CGI out his shins. What is this?
You gotta feel for the agents there who got cussed out after one day on set with these actors.
Well, that's the thing. I don't know at what point they realised how bad the film was. Since I've only seen bits and pieces of some of the interviews about it afterwards. I mean, Peter Dinklage said that originally it was sort of going to be a beautiful film about the difficulties of dwarfism, and then it became this weird rom-com thing. But the thing is, it doesn't even succeed as sort of a bad rom-com, but you can see sort of vestiges of rom-com in there. Like, there's one scene where Kate Beckinsale's parents are worried about her marrying Matthew McConaughey, and it's not because of the dwarfism aspect of Matthew McConaughey's family. It's because Kate Beckinsale's family are Jewish, and that's sort of saved as a punchline. It's such a fucking weird film. I just need to show you it, man. I really do. That's something that we could do as a recurring segment for this podcast.
We could go over Tiptoes.
Not Tiptoes specifically, but I will suggest ridiculous media that we watch, and we'll watch a film or a couple of episodes or something of a series, and then the next podcast we discuss
I like this idea.
Yeah, sort of make it a weird homework task. So we come back to, what do you think of Spartacus Blood and Sand? Weirdly well historically researched for something that's about, dicks and cutting people in half.
My two favorite things.
And a dick does get... No, it doesn't get cut in half, but it does get removed on 2 or 3 different occasions. To clarify, different dicks.
Oh, thank you for clarifying.
Well, yeah, because if it was the same dick being removed over and over, you just feel really sorry for the guy. It's like, come on, 1 is more than enough.
Alright. So, tell me about how you got your internet handle.
Okay, so it started off as a character that I played in Dragon Age, which is one of the nerdiest sentences I've ever uttered. And I was just speaking about how enamoured I was with the historical research for Spartacus. So my sister's boyfriend kept calling me Lucas Radaby, who was a South African football player. I don't fully understand why he did this, but he did. And Gish in Dungeons and Dragons stuff is a mage that casts buffs on his party and actually fights in melee as well.
Ah.
Because, yeah, if I'm casting spells and stuff, it doesn't mean I can't punch a dude in the face. It's kind of annoying to me how often magic users in a lot of these settings just wrinkly old men doing interpretive dance in the background and not actually being involved. But that might be because, I saw Lord of the Rings when I was young, and I saw Ian McKellen swinging a sword about, and thought, if Ian McKellen, who was, I don't know, in his 70s or 80s at that point, can stab an orc, why can't a relatively young wizard,
Yeah, that hits me too with, archers. Archers are just shown to be, agile and dexterous, but at the same time, weak in both appearance and also actions compared to someone who just unga bungas their way to victory. And by all accounts in real life, shooting arrows over and over is a tremendously enduring task. You need to be strong to be able to both pull that drawstring back, shoot the arrow, and just keep going over and over and over again. You'll see just some weaklings that are just archers in shows and movies and whatnot, and they should never be able to actually be able to use a bow.
Yeah, it's always the spindly elf girl that's using a long bow or something, when using it would crush their shoulders under the draw weight or something.
Absolutely.
But they don't use crossbows enough.
That too.
I think that's honestly the simple solution. If you've got a spindly archer character, give them a crossbow.
And you can do a lot with the crossbow too. You can make it have a shield go on top of it. You can make it long. You can have it with a trifle thing. You can do a lot more with a crossbow, I feel like, in terms of just aesthetic and function than you can with the bow. And you just still keep that, in my opinion, this narrative around it intact, in a sense, plausibility. You can't really just put a additional bowstrings on a bow and just suddenly be able to like fire 3 arrows. Unless you're an elf.
I know we were going to speak about Age of Sigmar at some point, but fuck those triple bowstrings. Just no. No. They don't make sense. They just don't.
No, you need magic to make something like that work.
But it's just a fucking bow. It shouldn't need magic in order to just function. It's not like necromancy or flying water turtles or whatever. It's just a fucking bow.
That's right. But, the thing with high elves in Age of Sigmar is that they're all extra from top to bottom. So it just completes the outfit.
Well, that's kind of one of my gripes with Age of Sigmar, that because of how high fantasy it is, it's so ungrounded, which is one of the things I quite liked about the original fantasy setting.
Well, I will tell you from there that there are ways in which the narrative tries to anchor the high fantasy elements as best as they can. And it isn't perfect. However, I will say that the chains are there, trying to hold it down to the ground in at least some form or fashion. And we can explore those. It's one of the... And to me, those anchors are what help me actually stay within the setting, because otherwise I'd be yoinked right out of it. I hear you.
Yeah, the fucking Stormcast Eternals, who, at least now they're people in the armour, whereas before they were just armour that moved, with souls of people from the previous world put in, which must have been some form of hell for them. Okay, I've survived the apocalypse, Sigmar thinks I'm a chosen person, and now I'm trapped in cold steel for eternity. Lovely.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much a curse, as well as, in a sense, a gift. And that's very much something that's explored with the Stormcast in their settings, in their book and literature. And to me, it makes them very human and approachable and likable as a faction, other than just being golems in that sense, or constructs. I'll see that opinion thrown around that, I wish that Stormcast were just like automatons in that sense. And to me, if you do that, you take away so much of what makes Stormcast likable or relatable.
Yeah, I do see what you mean. It's like how in 40k people like the Space Wolves because they at least used to act like space Vikings, whereas most of the Adeptus Astartes are sort of borderline sociopathic with their lack of emotions.
Absolutely.
Or psychopathic.
And apparently in some of the Horus Harry books, not Horus Harry, Horus Heresy.
Horus Harry. Dude's bald. Dude is not hairy
at all. But no, there's a few. I guess there's several Horus Heresy books that actually flesh out the Space Marine chapters and makes them less like the Flanderization of some of many of their models make them out to be.
Yeah, like the Emperor's Children being more about perfection rather than just being sleazebags. That's the nice way of putting it.
Well, sleazebags is definitely the word that we can use for anything broaching Slaanesh. So, if you...
Yeah.
So, alright, we went over both of our intros, and...
I do have to show you something, because you mentioned Horus Harry and how he's bald. So, I call this Joris Lupercal.
Oh no.
Horus looks like Joe Rogan. I don't know what you want from me.
Well, to be fair, a lot of bald people look alike. And that's regardless of skin color.
Is that racist?
It's
is that a race thing?
Regardless of any skin color, you are just dealing with less of a dimensionality of just making someone more individual.
If we're going to stick with Joe Rogan, I'm going to ask: does the bald chimp look like a normal person?
Bald
bald-
people look like regular people. What do you mean?
Actually, yeah, Joe Rogan does. Yeah, you know what I mean? Does that bald? You said bald people look the same to you. Does the bald chimp look like those bald
I'm gonna
people?
have to just disclaim myself here. All I'm trying to say is, if you took 50 bald people and you just like headshots of them, and you overlaid them one on top of one another, hell, you don't even need 50.
You end up with
don't
Joe
even need,
Rogan.
like 50 of them. You probably could just go with like a dozen, and just everything starts to mesh and meld together.
I'm just trying to find which bald chimp I should send you, because half of them I would not be able to use in YouTube, just because they've got their sacks swinging away, and no one wants to see that.
I don't even want to see it.
There we go. That one. No, you can see his scrote. No, I thought that was safe. I thought it was safe, but no.
I'm not clicking
there
that.
we go.
I'm not looking. Nope, you can't make me.
His scrote's not in it. That is clearly Joe Rogan.
I just
very
don't like
clearly
seeing, shaved animals normally.
The shaved bear was fucking terrifying. I was showing everyone on Discord that for a week or two when I found out about
you
it.
You could shave a gorilla and it looked just as scary. People don't like looking at naked mole rats, and that's a commonly naked animal. Okay.
It's not just commonly naked. They're naked by their very nature. Oh, did you know the naked mole rat was the first animal that was hypothesized to exist before it was discovered?
That I did not know.
There was a Swedish biologist who predicted that there would be a eusocial burrowing mammal, and then 20 years or so after his prediction, they discovered the naked mole rat.
Interesting. And why did he theorize that such an animal existed?
I suspect it's because eusociality pops up in a bunch of different groups. And so it's strange that mammals didn't seem to have a eusocial animal. But on top of that, mammals do like to burrow. So that's my guess as to why he put those three things together.
Interesting. And what does eusocial mean?
Okay, so humans are a social species. Broadly speaking, I mean, we Warhammer players are exceptions to this. But a eusocial species is a species that isn't social, but from an outside observer looks like it would be.
Oh.
So things like bees and ants, they're not social with each other in the way that humans, chimps, dolphins are, but they form a hierarchy and they cooperate.
Right.
I mean, the EU in this is Greek for absence of, I think. Just as a side note, utopia is a pun.
I'm learning everything today. I did not know that was even a pun.
Yeah. It's a classical Greek pun. So, have you heard the term dystopia? Yeah, I mean, you know about 40k. You know what a dystopia is.
That or living in Florida.
No, I didn't know you were in Florida.
Just saying
I shall ask you about the bath salts in a moment. The zombie face eating. So, EU, for you, like with eusocial, is to do with an absence of. So a utopia is a classical Greek pun, not only being a good place, but being no place. Because no place is a utopia.
Ah, I see. Okay. Huh.
Yeah, it's sort of similar to Odysseus and the Cyclops, with I am no man. Who blinded you? No man did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that, a pun has existed for so long, we've forgotten it was there.
Stuff gets retooled all the time. When it gets its limelight again, I'm sure it'll be in normal discourse. More like how Seize the Day, evolved, and how we just attribute that to just YOLO.
Yeah, which is I much prefer Carpe Diem, but there we go. Whatever. People are less likely to assume YOLO is something to do with fish.
That is true.
Yeah, that was a terrible pun, but
It's okay.
I'm standing by it.
Fish can't even use dimes.
They can't use dimes.
Have you ever seen a fish use currency?
Oh, I see. Yeah. Are we counting the Hanar in Mass Effect?
No, we're grounded. Low fantasy.
Because there's biologically no such thing as a fish.
What do you mean?
Fish is not a useful category in biology. Because it includes too many very distant, too distantly related groups.
Interesting.
So, I think it's humans are more closely related to salmon than salmon are to some quote-unquote fish. If you have fish as a clade as a descriptive unit in biology, because of all the other species that would overlap with it and things, you can't come up with a viable definition for what is a fish, really. And you'd have to include all vertebrates, really, to have a working definition of fish. But because it includes things that clearly people do not consider fish, like us, fish isn't a useful group. It works in common parlance, but it doesn't work biologically.
Interesting. So what do they do in the alternative, then?
There's the cladistic approach, where you divide everything up by its evolutionary history, which you quite often need a genome for, which we're getting better at, so that's not too bad. Or you can just stick with the standard taxonomic approach created by Linné 250 years ago and just say, fuck it, it's a fish, whatever. I don't care. I'm a Swede, whatever.
Reminds me of how so many things are named crabs, but not necessarily all the things that are named crabs are actually crabs.
That's because being a crab is a useful thing to be in evolutionary terms, so everything just becomes crabs over and over again.
I mean,
it's really
get it.
weird.
If I could choose to have pincers and a tough carapace to block incoming attacks, I'm not going to say no.
Are you one of the crab people?
I will neither
Do you walk like crab, talk like people?
I will neither confirm nor deny this accusation.
The idea of Prussian crab people is kind of fucking terrifying when you think about it.
You might have think that the Prussians got dissolved after the events of World War II, but in fact they just went down below into the sea.
Honestly, that's one of the fucking weirdest things about German history to me. That the territory that was the basis for the kingdom that formed Germany is no longer in Germany.
It's absolutely goofy, because it's where Prussia, originally started was around Estonia and Lithuania, that little nub in the Baltics. And then it just, people in the way with treaties went, migrated south towards more of where we think of where, the Central Europe is, with Brandenburg, and then you get Berlin, and it just starts acclimating slowly but surely into the German state. But in a sense, Prussia as a state stayed in
not quite
Germany in the sense their bureaucracy all the way until World War II.
Yeah, Goebbels, I think it was head of the Prussian police. This is to do with the Reichstag fire and stuff.
Absolutely. It was just it was just that the word that the state was called Germany itself, but as a municipality, Prussia very much existed within all the paperwork.
Yeah, yeah, it was still a useful administrative division, but I do kind of need to pick you up on how Prussia became German. It wasn't that they migrated into Germany. It's to do with the Teutonic Knights and them crusading against the
Yeah,
last
and then they
pagans in
go
Europe.
right into that region of Europe, and then they just like set up camp and said, "This is our
Yeah,
land now."
that's yeah, and then after a couple of centuries, the Grand Maester of the Teutonic Order converted to. This is when they were vassals of the Poles. He was the first head of state in Europe to become Protestant, and that's when he became. I think he was just Duke at the time rather than King. But yeah, it's kind of weird that a monastic order was the first one to officially become Protestant.
Everyone was just scared to convert.
And
They needed someone to go first.
possibly, I'm not entirely sure of the specifics of why they did. It might just be because he wanted to be able to marry and have kids, because
I don't blame him.
can you
one
blame him? I mean, it's a fairly standard human thing to want to do those two
think of how
things.
thirsty Catholic priests are.
Isn't? Yeah, and not in the fun way. In the
Well,
just
they look at
bad
popes
way.
throughout the years and they're like, "Oh, the pope gets to violate the rules, but I don't."
Well, the celibacy rules, I think, were only introduced about 1050, I want to say. I'm going to have to look this up again, but priests being celibate is... It's not something that was in the very early church at all. It started in what we broadly consider the
Right.
Middle Ages. But even then, the popes would quite often ignore it. So, do you know about the Festival of the Chestnuts, I think it's called?
Don't, and I'm a little bit scared.
So, the popes would have the best parties. So much so that Freddie Mercury would probably say, "Hang on, mate, that's a bit much." So, with I think it's the Festival of the Chestnuts. I'm going to have to look up its name at some point. The Pope would hire a bunch of ladies of the night, if you will, and have them just be naked in the hall, with lots of chestnuts on the floor. And the ladies have to pick up the chestnuts, but they're not allowed to use their hands.
Oh.
Yeah. Papacy's weird, dude. At one point they had a ball grabbing ceremony as well.
We don't need to get into that.
But there was at least allegedly a female pope. I don't know if there actually was or not, but there's at least the story that happened. And I think as a result of this, there was a test when someone became pope. I don't know if they still have this test, but part of me hopes it's stayed into the modern age because it's hilarious. Where they have the pope sit naked on a chair that has a hole in the middle of it. And then they have someone, grab them from underneath and give them just a tug to make sure they're actually attached.
I hope the hand is warm, not cold.
Just as a courtesy to the Pope-elect, make sure your hands are warm
That's
before
one of
you
those
grab the
tests that you'd
scrote.
want to just get into the digital age rather than staying in the past.
What, scanning the scrote
you know
instead?
We can write it down on here in perpetuity. I would rather digitally scan my scrotum rather than having my balls yanked.
I mean, that's a fairly... Hang on, what if the Pope had an unfortunate accident and they were a eunuch?
Then you'll have to tell me what happens if you fail the test.
I don't know. I guess you're just not allowed to be Pope unless you've got a decent reason.
Well, okay then.
But I mean, they've been elected Pope, and the Pope is supposed to be infallible, so they could just declare the Pope doesn't have to have nards.
That they could.
I don't know what the specifics of Vatican law are on
I
the
personally
absence of
think they should
testicles.
just go to a multiple choice quiz. You know, let's have them go. Let's have them
Okay.
make sure their Bible knowledge is up to snuff.
But again, remember that the Pope's just elected. It's the College of Cardinals. They all just decide, well, that guy's going to be Pope now.
Right, but I figure if you're a Pope, you got to be able to just one of your functions should be that you know everything that's in the Bible. Like you never have to use the Bible as a reference. I mean, what else are they paying you for? You're the representative.
Well, I think that the idea is that by the time you've got to the cardinal stage, you already should be up to snuff on that stuff.
Right. Unless you paid your way to be a cardinal.
I'm not saying that they necessarily are, which historically is kind of what happened. Yeah. How did we get into papal politics?
It all started with Prussia. Funnily enough.
And then we got to papal politics via tiptoes.
It's good stuff. We're kind of like a Google search.
Yeah.
Just keep following related articles.
With ADHD. We're a search engine that needs
right.
to be medicated. Oh dear. Ask Adderall Jeeves. Did you ever use
No.
Ask Jeeves?
No.
I remember at school being told that I should try to use Ask Jeeves because Google's not the only search
I
engine.
gotta tell you, I don't trust things named Jeeves. It's not a real name.
Well, yeah. I think it's just sort of a term for
It's
butlers in
dehumanizing.
general. Jeeves define.
I remember. Oh, sorry.
Concerningly, it came up with. It's okay. When I was typing it into Google before I pressed search, it asked if I wanted to define Jews. No, that's not what I'm after at the moment. Okay, so there are a series of books called Jeeves and Wooster,
Mm-hmm.
and Jeeves is the butler. But I can't find out if Jeeves was just sort of the generic term for butler before then.
I remember watching Drake and Josh way back in the day, and they had an episode where Josh was being a chauffeur, as he was the one who got his license first over Drake. And the thing was, they called him Chives. And to me, just Chives, Jeeves, it's all the same thing. It's fake names. It's like naming your pet Bubbles. That's not a real name. Try better.
Do you know what the two most common names for goldfish allegedly are?
I'm guessing one's fish.
No, Jaws and Fluffy.
I'm proud of the human race.
I don't know who did this poll, who asked them, how they came to this result, but allegedly that was what they found.
Well, maybe it's like the census, you know, that you always get sent something in the mail every now and then. But maybe more than every 10 years.
Possibly. I'm still pissed off that the UK government doesn't recognise Jedi as a religion. Enough people put it on the census that legally it should be recognised, but they decided not to.
I don't blame them.
It's discrimination,
I think
I tell
Star
you.
Wars fans should be discriminated against.
Okay, choose your next words wisely. Why is this?
There's too many of you. And there's too much money to be made from you. Therefore, you are worthy of being roasted.
In the last 5 years, maybe 10, no, I've bought some Star Wars games on Steam, that's about it. Fallen Order was pretty good. But I haven't seen the new films because, from what I can tell, They suck balls. And not even in a coherent manner.
The worst kind of ball sucking.
Yeah, I know. It's incompetent ball sucking. But then again, I mean, people give Rian Johnson all the flack for it, and he did fuck up royally. I am not denying that. But J.J. Abrams should never have been put in charge of the films at all. Just never. Even before we get into lens flare and what he did with Star Trek, do you know what TV series that kind of put J.J. Abrams on the map? He was heavily involved with Lost.
Oh, that I did not know. That's interesting.
Yeah, and his advice to the other people running the show was set up all these mysteries, and you don't need to explain them. You don't even need to have an answer, because the way J.J. Abrams makes films and TV isn't about having a story, it's about getting the audience to engage. And you can get the audience to engage by implying that something deeper is going on, even though you yourself have no fucking clue what's going on.
I think that's okay as a potential factor, personally. And I've heard actually good things about Lost. It was, in a sense, one of those scuffed gems of a TV series.
As a factor in what's going on, it's fine to have. It's not that I object to there being mystery and that everything needs to be explained and stuff. But at least the creator needs to know what's going on. Because otherwise, it just doesn't fucking work. Just mechanically, it ceases to function.
You know, I feel like you'd have strong opinions about Death Stranding, if that's the case.
Yeah, I've heard stuff about Death. I quite like Dark Souls, man, and I'm aware that their backstory has a similar problem. Although you can create a functional backstory with the information given, but the creator himself has basically said he's got no idea what's going on.
Dark Souls and other Souls games, with Miyazaki has said in the past, though, for those who don't know, Hidetaka Miyazaki is, in a sense, the voice, the developer behind the Souls games in general, working at FromSoft. But he has said in the past that...
Well,
what's up?
Should we call him Daddy Souls? He's Souls Daddy. He's Souls Daddy.
But he said in the past that when he was a kid, and when he was learning English as a second language, he'd be reading all sorts of different books in English, and he just wasn't proficient with the language yet. So as a result, when he was reading these books, there was just passages and parts that he just did not understand or know about. In a sense, like Swiss cheese, there was just patches. And as a result of that, he loved that idea and just incorporated that design element into how he develops games and how he puts the stories with it. And it allows the player to fill in their own holes and patches with it and make the setting feel more real to them as they immerse themselves and patch up the gaps.
Yeah, because you feel lost within it and stuff. But there's still more to it than that. Like, there is some actual story going on, and there is a decent mechanical gameplay to it and stuff. But with J.J. Abrams, it's all just the mystery box. There is nothing else aside from lens flare.
At least lens flare is pretty.
It is, and so's Daisy Ridley, but that does not mean that the new films are any good.
Last time I saw Star Wars was Episode 3 in theaters. I was a little kid, and I went with my sister and my father. And I just remember it just being this crazy spectacle of a thing. I didn't really understand everything that was going on, just on account as I was a kid at the time. But it was...
Yeah. And the prequels, they have the Senate and stuff. Kids are just going to get lost there. because you know what kids like,
And I don't even
bureaucracy.
remember that much about the film itself. I remember the opening act with the fight with General Grievous. I remember the ending part, the fight on the lava. And I remember in the middle with all the kids getting murdered.
Okay, so this is going to be another one on the list. Not Revenge of the Sith itself. Backstroke of the West.
No,
do you know what Backstroke of the West is? Okay, so you know that in China there's a huge pirated film market.
Yep, that makes sense.
Just absolutely enormous. Okay, so Backstroke of the West is what you get when you translate everything from Revenge of the Sith into Mandarin and then back into English.
Huh.
So instead of Revenge of the Sith, Backstroke of the West. And a collection of voice actors have gone through and completely redubbed the film with the new dialogue that comes from translating it backwards and forwards. And it's fucking hilarious. It's just amazing. So, but Chancellor, we are the big, and they refer to the Jedi as the Presbyterian Church. It's just amazing.
I'm a big fan of Kung Fury.
I do quite like Kung Fury. It was a bit too intense for me, but I quite like it. In a similar vein, I need to get you to watch The Second Eye in Sky as well.
There's so much homework that comes out of this podcast, my dude.
I know, man. At least we've got it recorded, so I can bother writing down a list later. But have you seen The First Eye in Sky?
I'm gonna be honest. I'm a bitch when it has come to actually watching movies. I am very much an uncultured swine, only working off of the most common of movie references, not necessarily understanding the film in which they came from, but using them like I would, blissfully unaware of what I'm tapping into.
Oh, my friend, I do not think that we can call Iron Sky in any way cultured. I can describe it in 6 words. Moon Nazis come back to Earth.
That does sound like a good plot.
And it's amazingly shit. I don't know if it's intentionally bad, but it's amazing and bad at the same time. Well, that's the thing. The first one is sort of in this weird middle state, and the second one is definitely so bad it's good territory because they go overboard. It's like Crank in that regard.
Nope.
Do you know Crank? Okay, this is another set of films to go on the list then. Crank, term for methamphetamine, and it's sort of to do with how high octane it is. Oh yes, I will add sound effects and shit. Don't worry about that, Prussian. I just read the message. Don't worry. So Crank is Jason Statham has to keep his heart rate above a certain level, otherwise he will die. And the first film, it's watchable, but the second film, they realise how fucking ridiculous it is, and it's amazing as a result of it.
Is it like a resting heart rate, or is it like a kind of active? Like, how are you going to sleep with something like that?
Well, that's the thing. He just spends the entire film running around doing ridiculous shit. Just anything to keep his heart rate up. So he gets into fights, he takes drugs. In the second one, I'm fairly sure he has public sex with his girlfriend in front of a stadium. It's just the weirdest film, and it's amazing. Fuck yeah. And this is something... Okay, so you know that in the Warhammer servers that we're in, that every now and again someone will ask who'll win in a fight, Tyrion or Grimgor.
Yeah. Yeah.
That kind of shit. Are you aware that there was a TV program where they did more or less that,
I
but with
believe
real
it.
life people?
It sounds like Screw Attack gone wrong.
Deadliest Warrior. Deadliest Warrior, my friend. I need to show you Deadliest Warrior for so many reasons. The hosts are so horrendously biased. They do the worst things to mannequins. So they'll make a torso out of ballistic gel. The doctor will come up to it and just say, "Oh, okay, you've cut its head off. Well, this man is clearly dead." Yes, because we need a trained medical professional to tell us that the man with no head is dead. But, it gets... I don't know how much I can say without just spoiling for you the absolute insanity. But, so, they've got Vlad the Impaler against Sun Tzu in one, and they demonstrate Vlad impaling a dude. But that's not even the craziest shit in there. The craziest one might be the episode that was banned in the UK.
Did they make fun of English longbowmen or something?
When... No. The two groups they pitted against each other were the Taliban and the IRA. And they pretended that the IRA were the good guys. They're better than the Taliban, but that's not a very good benchmark. It's amazing.
No, I wish they didn't ban that episode. That's
You
incredible.
I've seen it. They never broadcast it in the UK because, holy shit, you can't say good things about the IRA when they car bombed people who are still alive now.
No, you
can't
would send
say
a Tory's
that.
heart. You'd send a Tory into an aneurysm.
It's not just a Tory dude. The
That
IRA
is true.
bombed Manchester and stuff. I think they tried to assassinate Margaret Thatcher as well, which, in fairness, any UK Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher was probably the most assassinatable. But that's not the point. You don't pretend that they're good people after they do that shit. I just need to... Are you free after we've
I
recorded
guess so.
this? Okay, we've got this long list of things to watch. I'll edit this another time. I am
Okay,
showing you
I
at least
understand.
one of these things. Yeah, I mean, I think we've been recording for, almost an hour now, and we've barely touched Age of Sigmar, which was going to be one of the
fine.
focuses.
I didn't know how long you wanted to run for, so this is all fine and good for me.
However long, dude. I've seen podcasts
probably
go on
not
for
do
4
that.
hours, but fuck that noise. I'm
Well, we should
Christ,
stay
no.
around like
No.
we should go small at first. Maybe no more than 90 minutes. I say, because remember
Yes.
we want people to listen to us.
Yeah. Yeah, and if it's just on as background noise, and every now and again someone hears me say IRA, Gary Oldman, ha ha ha, I'm okay with that. Even though those would be some very niche things to pick up, especially since they're opposite ends of the podcast, I think, at this point. But holy shit, dude. You've not seen Spartacus. It's so well it's weirdly well researched. That's the only thing I can say about it at this point. It's just okay. Shall we bitch about the end times and then try to wrap up after that so we can get into Age of Sigmar stuff next time?
But let me start off that topic by asking you this: when did you get into Warhammer Fantasy?
Okay. I'm gonna feel old, but
What edition was that?
nearly 16 years ago. Six? it was around the time that it sort of crystallised into the more or less what we knew as proper Warhammer fantasy, I think. 2000, it was sort of 2003, 2004 is just before I got into it, I think. Let's do a search for 2006 edition. It was on 7th that time. Okay, so I came in about tail end of 6th, start of 7th, around
and
that
did
period.
Did you collect any armies?
Yes, high elves. As you can tell by my voice and my occasionally imperialistic
this is just making things
tendencies.
so much clearer for me. In terms of your opinions on things.
I know, in so many ways. Now the question is, did I become a high elf, or are the high elves based on me?
That is a question that we're gonna explore throughout time, my friend. I don't think there's an easy answer. And just to share as myself,
I know
I was someone who came in after Warhammer Fantasy was kablooey and into its sequel, specifically the second edition of its sequel, Age of Sigmar.
So you do not know the pain that I went through.
It's in a sense reading about anything that's before your time, or watching anything that's before your time. You're just not directly connected to it. You didn't grow up with, or I didn't grow up with it, or I just wasn't privy to it when it was in existence. So you're always doing a retrospective on it and catching up, which gives you an ultimately different perspective than those who were with it when it was into being.
Those who suffered through it. It's like the Soviet Union and the fall thereof. You're of the generation where you just don't understand why anyone would be nostalgic of it. But there's still some old Russian people that kind of liked Papa Stalin.
I definitely believe it. There's more than 7 billion people out there. You can find someone that's into anything. But we digress.
Oh, it's a weirdly common thing. But yeah. Let's not go into part of why Putin is popular. It's fucking terrifying, and it's not just because he's an actual Kislevite that rides bears. Oh yes, absolutely.
He's
because
just
there's nothing homoerotic about that at all.
Old depiction of Ursa.
It's not like. I think we're just looking past the obvious symbolism of the fact that he is riding a bear.
You
know what bear means in the gay community, don't you?
I have a feeling you're going to be crossing the Rubicon more than I will.
What, you think that I'm personally going to have to fight Putin? At this rate, I wouldn't be surprised.
All I'm saying is just
he is the endgame boss.
Make sure you have a paddle with your boat as you can cross the Rubicon back and forth. I'll be on one side, waving.
You're just waving. You're going to fucking die, Rad. I know.
End times. So you went through. Six
end times. Yes.
Yeah, but we'll get to
the severe trauma that is the end
6th
times.
And 7th, and then 8th edition. And you said you collected high elves. Did you have a full 2,000 point army in which you used to battle people?
Yes, I did. I didn't get that many battles though, because rural England, there just weren't that many people about. So I got some battles, but it was more the lore and background and stuff, which is part of the reason the end times was particularly painful. And so yeah, I had some dragon princes, some sword masters, bunch of high elf militia of both archer and spearman, and of course Loth and Sigurd, who were both archers and spearmen. Didn't have any monsters though, but I did have Teclis, who are you aware of one of the nicknames I give Teclis?
Is it suitable for work?
None of this conversation's been suitable for work, but he and Tyrion, I consider to be the testicle twins. because they're inseparable and they're symbiotic. And if you flick either of them, it'll really hurt.
Your analogy is apt. I will grant you that.
But also, when I was speaking to my mum about buying my first Warhammer army on eBay, we went through the different listings for the High Elves, and she was absolutely horrified because she thought she had read that they had a testicle mage.
Yeah.
Techless. and it's kind of stuck with me ever since. And so, even in my mind's eye, occasionally they're sort of wrinkly and have wiry hair curling out of them.
Not okay.
But given the size difference between them and stuff, and the Tyrion is angry and kind of horny, it fits better and better the more you think about it.
I do know that Techless on the tabletop was a pretty beefy caster. He would just absolutely decimate armies like Tomb Kings.
Oh yeah, that dude would fuck.
Yeah.
So he was the highest level of caster, and because he would take magical steroids, he would get other stuff on top of it, so he got way more casting dice than basically anyone else ever could. I mean, Lord Croak was about the only one that could compete with him on the tabletop. Maybe Mazda Mundi. But Techless was very OP, especially since he had, well, I mentioned one variety of magical steroids, but he had another variety as well, which if he took, he would get sort of an extra attack and extra strength and a bunch more weapon skill, so he could cut through Black Orcs, and it was hilarious. Oh no, and you've got this little weedy elf guy going, yeah, and just murdering them. Top shit. But yes, so, part of the reason I really dislike End Times is how they treated the elf storyline.
Yeah,
so, do you know Malekith's backstory?
Don't get me wrong, I started, before on my Age of Sigmar train, as, I guess you could say I'm an Age of Sigmar aficionado. I started with reading all the army books with 8th edition and 7th edition for Warhammer Fantasy. So I'm pretty well versed on everything within Warhammer Fantasy. It's just that when it comes down to it, people are asking questions and I just don't care to answer. And usually someone else will just like take up the punch for it.
That's fair enough, man. Fair enough. Okay, so what would you say Malekith's story arc was? The thing that made him who he was?
Malekith is, there's always the comparisons, with Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader. As Malekith is very much shaped by the tragedy of events that had befallen him, just as much as his hubris did. And he's relatable in that sense of his tragedies. That isn't to say that his tragedies excuse or absolve him of his actions after, his melting within the Azorian flames and the donning of the armor and then just setting up camp over in, not North America. But it does make him a
in Quebec, he's Quebecois, damn it.
Character in that sense, and I think when people look at Malekith, they tend to just look at him only from his most recent history, most recent developments, rather than taking him up as a whole. And I think it's just something that goes with a lot of characters, but very much so
they look at him just as. Okay, so do you think it's fair to say Malekith's story is that of the fallen hero?
Because to him, if you look at it from his point of view, he was doing everything right. And it was others that forced him, in a sense, to take the actions that he did. Whether it was the machinations of his mother, the political intrigue at the High Elf courts, it all winds and webs together to, in a sense, have Malekith think to himself that he is justified for all of his actions that he has done. Whereas that's not necessarily black and white with how things go in reality.
Yes, that seems reasonable. So, with this in mind, do you think that it makes, from a narrative sense and one of character, for him to really be LOL's the real king after all?
Interesting snafu, personally, where by all accounts you would have the character, in a sense, go past I wasn't actually meant to be the chosen one, or so on and so forth, and I made my own way as a result of it. And I'll never know whether I was supposed to be the chosen one or not, but I had to just make decisions in spite of the fact. And narratively, you don't necessarily have you were actually supposed to be it, but you chickened out before you actually were going to find out you were the good guy.
Yeah. So the fact you had to laugh shows how fucking ridiculous that idea was.
Just because of the unexpectedness of it. Not necessarily that I hate the idea, but it's an idea, and because in many ways I do like the idea, because it's just something different from the norm. It goes against the grain of how characters like him, tragic characters, are approached in literature. Because you usually have it where the characters just move on and progress past that point, and then they'll be placed onto different story angles because of it. Rarely do you get the whole reapproaching of the dilemma, and that's what this plot point is. It's just showing what could have been, and then how does the character react with it. And on that note, I think it makes it more memorable as a result to have that choice.
I would have been more okay with it if he had a redemption arc leading to it, though. Because the way it currently is he decided he was going to be the Phoenix King, and as Surian agreed with it, then he fucked up, then he led his own species through 10,000 years of civil war that almost led to their extinction, and then it turns out he was king after all. And there's no act of redemption or anything leading to it. It's just lols, we all fucked up for this amount of time, by the way, here's the crown, buddy. And half the High Elves just go along with it.
That a redemption arc is needed for story elements like that?
At the very least, if they're going to do that with Malekith in particular, yes, he needs a redemption arc of some variety. Or he needs more than a Surian just saying, "Yeah, I was going to choose you, but you didn't barbecue for quite long enough. You're raw, mate." This story makes a Surian into a dickhead version of Gordon Ramsay.
To be fair, is a plausible showing of or/interpretation of a Surian to be a dickhead.
Yeah, but he's also just a stupid dickhead in this example.
Be as it may, I do agree with you that the execution is disjointed from the plot element itself. And I could honestly say that about a lot of the end times plot points, though. And maybe part of my opinion is shaped by the fact that I wasn't directly connected to the High Elves. I didn't own an army. I didn't collect the books. I didn't engage with Warhammer Fantasy until after its death, but during its resurrection. But to me, personally, the whole Malekith becoming Phoenix King is a plot point that I like in terms of its potentiality in spite of its execution.
Yes, I do see what you mean, that it could have been an interesting storyline if it wasn't done in such a retarded way.
In that,
that's the only word I can use to describe the execution.
You've got some person. It hits you personally. It's a personal ring to you.
Well, it's not just that it hits me personally. It doesn't make sense for what he was doing and stuff. To suddenly be told, by the way, yeah, you were this. Sorry, bruv. I mean, if it was done so that, I don't know, the elves as a whole were about to be wiped out, and so a summit was called with even the Dark Elves, and Malekith was chosen as sort of a compromise candidate in some way. But even then, he still needs to do some shit to show that he's worth it. There just needs to be more before he's suddenly the ruler of all the elves.
In a way, I kind of headcanon it as, well, we were never given the full, complete story. We were just kind of given a mediocre retelling of it. In a sense, to me, that allows myself to be more justified in the whole, in spite of the plot point, rather than just being completely for it.
Yeah, you tolerate it because you've talked yourself into tolerating it.
Because not everything has to make sense. Well, we see this in real life, for instance. There are so many things that happen, both current events and in past, that just don't make sense, yet they happened anyway. As arbitrary as they were, arbitrariness happens all the time. And in this result, it would have been better for Malekith to have had a redemption arc, saved some puppies, maybe had some commentary on his past actions in regards to protecting over his people, but it didn't happen. You get that snafu dilemma where he was, in a sense, supposed to be, but he chickened out before he was actually supposed to get his reward. And as a result, and going through that, becoming the Phoenix King, and taking the actions as he went, it does bring him development as a character from his Darth Vader / Anakin Skywalker backstory / persona into something more than that, into something different.
Well, do you
remember
remember what Vader's last major act was? Yeah. So Vader had an act of redemption because of his son.
No.
Malekith doesn't get that. No. So with Vader it's earned, with Malekith it's not. And there's also a pretty major issue with Malekith being the Eternity King, which, that's a gross title. So, Phoenix King is chosen. That's not the particular thing, because, the method of succession for the Phoenix Kings wasn't established. So let's say Malekith was the Phoenix King after an Aryan. Do you know how they choose the Everqueen?
I believe so. The Ever King and the Ever Queen at the time, they consummate. Yeah, you're right. The Phoenix King and the Ever Queen.
King, but yeah.
They conceive and consummate and have a kid. and that, what is it? The daughter that comes through about from that consummation becomes the next Ever Queen.
Yeah. So we've already got a bit of an issue with Malekith's generation, because Anarion fathered the Everqueen with the previous Everqueen. Yeah. This is part of how Elariel is distantly related to Tyrion, but you know, they're 8th cousins or whatever, so it's not that bad. So, in the scenario where Malekith is indeed the Eternity King, he's banging his half-sister. Remember how the Everqueen is... The next Everqueen becomes the Everqueen.
Yep, the tree is becoming
by being the daughter of the previous one. There's an episode of the Squidbillies where Curly, I think the character's name is, starts a cult. And he describes how all the women in the cult are going to have sex with him and make a generation of daughters, who Curly will also have sex with. And after generation, they will just make more and more beautiful women. Basically, Malekith becomes a Squidbilly. You end up with with generation after generation of Everqueen that just look more and more like Malekith until Malekith is just banging his female self. But even more inbred, horrendously so. Yeah. There's so many things they could have done with Malekith, and they went with the worst possible option. Even with how we were trying to work it back, sort of squeezing in a redemption arc for him there. He could have a redemption arc anyway, and it end up, you know, not shagging his half-sister, and then his niece-daughter, and then his niece-daughter grandchild and things.
Yeah,
it's just terrifying.
You could say that plot point definitely needed more time in the oven.
Yeah, I mean, have you seen
movie.
The Hills Have Eyes? Yeah, it's about inbred hillbillies in West Virginia. If Malekith is supposed to be the Eternity King, this means the ruling class of supposedly the most refined race in the entire Warhammer world are basically the cast of The Hills Have Eyes. No, it's Wrong Turn. Sorry, Wrong Turn is the West Virginia one. Hills Have Eyes is Nevada nuclear inbreds. Which is still kind of grim. We're going for 80 minutes.
Well,
okay, you could just say that, Prussian. It's cool.
I was trying to be
you didn't
subtle.
need to type the message.
But yeah, this has been a cool, easy breezy 80 minutes.
It's cool.
And I think we've learned I think we've learned a lot today. Whether we wanted to or not.
Have we? Yay. But yeah, okay, we still need to come up with a name for this. I still go with sporadic interests. If you've got a better one, feel free to suggest. Okay, along with... We should just get a wheel or something to select whichever weird thing I've suggested we watch.
Well, anywho, Rad, it was rad talking to you. So...
Hey, it was Prussian talking to you. I know that doesn't fucking work, but I'm sticking with it. Yep.
So anyways, thank you all for listening in to two goobers ramble for 80 minutes. We'll see you next time.
About a concerning variety of things.